name is Robert Bell. I'm co-chair of the BSA K-12 Knowledge Community. We're very excited to have some guests here, and I'll turn it over to Tina, my co-chair.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. My name is Tina Stanislavski, and like Bob said, we're co-chairs of the BSA committee. We also have IES joining us tonight, which we're very excited about. We have the IES Boston and Rhode Island sections, and IES stands for the Illuminating Engineering Society. So I'm going to turn it over to Rick Paradis, and he's going to introduce our speaker for the evening. Rick is a IES board member for the local Boston section and also the Northeast Regional Director. So welcome, IES folks. Take it away, Rick.
Okay, thank you, Tina. Well, today's presenter is Dr. Mariana Figaro. She's the director of the Lighting Research Center and professor of architecture at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. She's also served as the Light and Health Program Director at LRC since 1999. She is known for her research on effects of light on human health, circadian photobiology, and lighting for older adults such as myself. In 2013, she was elected fellow of the Illuminating Engineering Society. She is author of over 80 scientific Okay.
I think if everybody could stay on mute, that would help that problem. Thank you.
So she's the author of over 80 scientific articles in her field of research, which is regularly featured in national media, including the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and Scientific America. Dr. Figaro also brought attention to the significance of light and health on topics of public interest through her recent TED-Med talks. Take it away, Mariana.
All right. Thank you, everyone. As I always say, it's nice to talk to the people in Boston. This is very different because I am not, let me see if I can share this screen. I am not having to drive through Boston. Those of you from the IES know that every time I have to go to Boston and drive, I get there really stressed because I hate driving in Boston. So, you know, hopefully everybody's safe with the COVID, and eventually we'll get back to normal, and I'm gonna have to go back to driving in Boston, but maybe traffic will be better because you guys are gonna learn how to work at home and not have to drive as much. So, all right, so a little bit of a background on this talk. I was at the ABX meeting last, I think it was October, and again, invitation by the IES Boston. Thank you very much, everybody that organized this event. And I gave a lot of the science background in this area of light and health. And then Rick and I talked, and we decided that it might not be a bad idea to talk a little bit more about the applications part. So that's the talk here today will be much more focused on the applications. How do I implement this knowledge then on the science part? I'm just going to give a brief overview of the science and then go from there. So I do want to thank you guys for inviting me to speak today. Our sponsors, without them, I really couldn't be presenting all the work that we have done in this area. So we've been very fortunate with funding, especially from the National Institutes of Health. So I guess the questions that, you know, to me, people trying to apply this knowledge should be asking is the science right? Does the theory fit the data? And what kind of data do we have out there? And is it consistent with the knowledge specific to neuroscience, okay? So you may get a lot of people telling you a lot of things about light and health, and I think the first thing you need to think about it is, does it match, or is that what the science is telling us? So as hard as it is, and I actually am an architect by training and ended up going to, they call it the dark side, which is the research and the science. And when I first started studying this area, I could barely read a graph. I'm like, what's an X and Y axis? You know, this is not what I do, and so on. And the truth is, once you learn it, it's you learn how important it is to understand the science and understand what's out there. So that's the one thing that I think it's very important to be able to discern what's good and what's bad, what's evidence and what's not evidence. And then the application is, does the science hold up in practice, especially does it matter? Because sometimes, you know, when it comes to science, we want to get it right. When it comes to the application, does this difference really matter? Or if I apply either one, is it going to be okay considering all the different things that happen in real life applications? And then the other question is, if it matters, what's holding me back? A lot in the lighting, at least in the lighting community, is everybody says, well, we don't have enough evidence in the field and so on. And the question is, how much evidence do you need? And what can you do with what you know right now? And I think that's what I'm going to try to convey. And then the other one is, how can I do this? Okay, and that's really, how can I implement this knowledge? So I guess in terms of the science, I'm going to give just a really, you know, 5 or 6 slides background. So just to set the stage for the applications part. So we know that in terms of light and light dark patterns reaching the back of our eyes, obviously enables us to see, but it also entrains the biological clock to the local time on Earth. This is why when you fly from New York to Vienna, you re-entrain your biological clock. It's because you're getting light dark cycle now in Vienna time instead of getting your light dark cycle in New York time. And it is that light dark cycle in Vienna that will really re-entrain your biological clock. The clock itself is fast, but you have a bunch of peripheral clocks in your body that will take a little bit longer to re-entrain and readjust to the new time zone. And that's why you suffer from jet lag. Now for that, we know that short wavelength or blue light is maximally effective. So you may hear a lot about blue and blue light and so on. And what I'm going to try to show you today, yes, it's most effective, but you can do it even if it's with an incandescent light source or with a warmer color light source. You just have to increase the amount of light to have the same effect, but it can be done. Now light also has an acute direct effect on people. I call it a cup of coffee effect. It is similar to a cup of coffee, okay? So it increases measures of alertness. It can impact production of hormones. It can decrease our reaction times, makes us faster. It can reduce feelings of sleepiness. Now, what's very interesting about that, it doesn't have to be blue. Even though blue light does that, we're showing that other colors of light, including red light, has a very strong alerting effect on people. So in terms of the biological clock, in order for us to be able to specify lighting for what we call circadian entrainment, which is really resetting the clock daily so that we adjust our biological clock to exactly 24 hours, because if we're in a dark cave and we get no light dark patterns, we have a clock that runs on average about 0.2 hours longer. It's about 24.2 hours. So every day we would be out of sync with the watch or the external clock. So it is the light, especially morning light, that readjusts our biological clock so that we're entrained or synchronized to the 24-hour cycle. But for that, we need to know spectrum amount, time, and duration in distribution. We, in lighting at least, talk a lot about spectrum because I think we can manipulate spectrum. We talk a little bit about amount because we can manipulate amount, but we don't talk much about timing, duration, and distribution. And I think we need to start thinking about that a lot more. So in terms of amount and spectrum, we do know that all types of photoreceptors participate in how we convert light signals into neural signals for the biological clock. Many of you may have heard about the new class of photoreceptor. It's called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, or IPRGCs. They have an opsin called melanopsin, which provides photosensitivity to these ganglion cells. Yes, melanopsin is an important photoreceptor for circadian phototransduction, but it does receive input from rods and cones. So in the end, it's all of the photoreceptors that together send that signal from the retina to the biological clock. So what we have done here at the Lighting Research Center, we've been trying to understand how is it that the retina combine those signals and send it to the clock. So we developed what we call spectral and absolute sensitivity functions, where basically what that is in terms of the spectral sensitivity, all that is looking at an SPD of the light source and how effective that SPD would be in stimulating those photoreceptors, and how is it that these photoreceptors together respond to that light for the circadian system. And then the curve that you see on the right is a transfer function that really gives you threshold to saturation. So is how much light does it take to affect the biological clock? And that's particularly important, because just telling me, like the AMA report did, saying you can't use 5,000 K light sources outdoors. Well, why not? If it is below threshold, it doesn't matter if it's 5,000 or 3,000, it's just not strong enough to affect the circadian system. So you need to know the absolute sensitivity in order to be able to say that light is safe or not safe. And then saturation is about above about 1,000 lux at the eye. And basically outdoors, you have saturation. Now, we've been working with a circadian stimulus of about 0.3, which would be equivalent to 30% meltdown suppression if you were exposed to that light source for 1 hour during the early part of the evening. So it's sort of a surrogate metric for how much that spectral power distribution and amount affects your biological clock. So it has to do with the response by the circadian system. So in order to make that easier on everybody, we have sort of a calculators freely available on our website, and we populate it with a bunch of light sources, or you can import your own light sources. You put the light levels at the eye, and then you can calculate how much of that circadian stimulus you're getting. And again, for daytime application, we're looking at a 0.3 or higher. For nighttime, evening and nighttime application, you're looking at a CS of less than 0.1, because it would be below threshold, and it would give you that robust light and dark pattern that you need. In terms of timing and duration, remember one thing: every photon counts. Every light you're getting over the course of your waking period matters. But morning light tends to make you go to bed earlier, and evening light delays your sleep. That's why we hear a lot about don't use your self-luminous displays before you go to bed, because you have that light right in front of your eye right before you go to bed. And what that does, it delays the timing of your sleep, because it may be suppressing the hormone melatonin, which is giving you that signal to go to sleep. In terms of duration, we actually looked at sort of the combination of spectrum, amount, and duration. And the question is, if you're targeting that circadian stimulus of 0.3, and you're using a 2700K, for example, you're going to need about an hour and a half of that light. And we converted the light into lux levels. And those of you that are more familiar with foot candles is, 1 foot candle is about 10.76 lux. So, divided by 10 there, you get roughly the amount of foot candles you need. Now, if you're using a cooler light source, you need about an hour to get the same circadian stimulus. So we talk a lot about spectrum, and the truth is, you're going to be in the space, at least in an office space, perhaps more than an hour or an hour and a half. So why bother with spectrum? I mean, if you have that amount of time, you can still use your 2700K, same light level, is just increasing the duration of the exposure, for example, okay? So I think what's important to think about when you're talking about the application, it's really, don't get hung up on only one metric, because there's a lot of things that are important when it comes to impacting the circadian system. Now, the other thing that I really think is underestimated in both architecture and lighting is the distribution of light. We tend to think about foot candles on the work plane, and honestly, horizontal foot candles does not matter for the circadian system. You want light at the eye level. That's what you want. You want to increase your vertical brightness so that you get more light at the eye. So one very effective way of doing that is developing light sources, not necessarily fixtures in the ceiling, but light sources that will increase that vertical illuminance. Interesting enough, we have new data that we just submitted the paper for publication this week, where we're showing that the nasal part of the eye, it's actually more sensitive to light than the upper or the lower part. A lot of people said, oh, the lower part is more effective. That's not what we're finding. We're actually finding that more close to the nasal part would be more effective, and hopefully we'll have that published soon. And as I mentioned, it's not just about blue light. So for the alerting effects of light, we do see similar effects with red. And this what you see these graphs here, the y-axis is normalized alpha power. And what that is sleepiness, okay? So when you're in dim light for an hour, you get very sleepy. If you are exposed to 5, 75, or 150 lux at the eye of a blue, and that's a 450 nanometers, or a red, which is 630 nanometers, you have a decrease in your alpha power, which means you have a decrease in your sleepiness. And as you can see, the decrease is very similar in the sense that both lights will reduce sleepiness when it comes to brain activities. Now, why is this important? This is very important for shift workers. So night shift workers who are at high risk for cancer, for example, one of the hypotheses because they're suppressing their melatonin during the nighttime by exposure to light at night. So if you give them red light does not suppress melatonin. So what it does, it gives you the cup of coffee without having the negative side effect. So we're actually finishing up a study with nurses, day shift and night shift nurses in the field. And we are seeing a positive impact of the red light on reaction times, as well as subjective sleepiness, and even improving their sleep when they get home. So that's something exciting that we're being able to translate from the lab to the field. So just summarizing the science, light sets the timing of our biological clock. It says it promotes entrainment. Morning light is best for entrainment. Short wavelength light at the eye is the most effective stimulus. However, you can do it with any light. As long as you manipulate, you change the light levels, or you change the distribution, you are able to get, or you change the duration, you're able to get the effect as well.
Bobby Joe.
Should we, can everybody mute themselves, please, if they can, because we got some interference there. And then light also has a direct acute effect on people, and for that it doesn't have to be blue, even though blue does the job as well. Now, what about the application? Okay, and that's where I'm gonna try to focus a little bit more. So this is actually a design guide that was published by UL. I was member of the task force. I'm also a member of the IES Light and Health Committee. So, you know, I don't have a dog in the fight. I want both published. And in fact, UL did reach out to the IES, wanted to have a joint effort, and the IES did not want to do it as a joint effort. So UL went ahead and published before. But, you know, basically, it was a very simple recommendation. And we started with the circadian effective light of 0.3 as a starting point. And I'll show you we're using other metrics that people are having to use for the WELL standard and for other applications. But the whole idea is you increase the amount of light people are getting during the day for a minimum of 2 hours during the daytime, preferably in the morning, and you reduce that in the evening. For this design guide, it was only during working hours. So there was no recommendation for the evening other than telling people you should reduce the amount of light that you get in the evening. This is just for the WELL recommendations. And I think when UL started doing that, they only had the version 1 as a starting point, and then it was updated with the version 2. But you can see that the metrics really don't differ too much. I think the only big difference is when you're talking about the science, the WELL standard used the equivalent melanopic lux, which is the response of one photoreceptor. And we do know that all the photoreceptors participate. So in terms of the scientific information, the melanopic lux is just incorrect because it's just one photoreceptor. But from practical purposes, what the UL is recommended, it's very close to having a CS of 0.3. It's actually a CS of 0.26 or 0.28. So it's really close, and it may not matter if you have to do a well project and you have to use the EML, you can go ahead and use it. And I know that now they are accepting the CS as an alternate metric, but it doesn't matter. Either one, you're going to get very close to what you need. And then for version 2, they now have 200 and 240 equivalent melanopic lux. And we looked at different LEDs. And if you use the 240 equivalent melanopic lux, in all the cases, or most of the cases, you're getting the CS of 0.3. So either metric you use from a practical point of view won't matter. If you want to get the science, you know, what we know right now, that all photoreceptors participate, you might want to go with the CS. But if you don't care, you can go with either one, with whatever you're comfortable going with. Now, from the, I think the UL had 2 public comments, and one of the comments was, all of this is too complicated for designers. Can we come up with something simpler? So what we did as a task force in the UL, we went through a lot of SPDs and looked at the different light levels at the eye. And we said, all right, from the existing common SPDs, how much light at the eye do you really need in terms of lux? Because then we can make it simple to meet that CS of 0.3 for most of the light sources that are available out there. And if you use 500 lux at the eye, 90% of the light sources that we tested when we were doing that as a task force for the UL would meet that requirement of the CS of 0.3. So if you don't want to think about it, you can design for 500 lux at the eye. Now, what's the downside for that? It can be too bright. It can be uncomfortable. People may complain, even though you have to do a good design to minimize that. And it's probably not the most energy effective way you can do the design. But you can probably do it for 2 hours and then dim it down, for example. So, you know, there are solutions and ways of doing it. And if you want to make it simple, it's a simple way to do it. And, you know, for 100% of the light sources we tested, you had to get up to 700 lux at the eye. But if you get up to 500, you're pretty good. If you get up to 400, you're getting over 80% of the light sources that we use, okay? So the key here is for you in practice is really to look at the SPD, run those SPDs through that calculator that we have for CS and see what you get, because just by choosing the right SPD, you're able to get the light levels or the CS levels that you want at the eye for lower amounts of light at the eye, okay? So the UL has this sort of quick guide, which I think it's very useful. It basically tells you what are the steps that you have to go through. So you establish the circadian effective lighting design criteria, CS of 0.3 or EML of 240 or the 500 lux at the eye, whatever you're comfortable doing it. Then you select your luminaire type. You use direct and direct, or you're going to use task light plus direct. You can choose how you want to do your design. Then you select your light source, for example, a 3000K. So that's the CCT you want, but pay attention because you really need to get the spectral power distribution. CCT alone, and I'll show you in a minute, is pretty much useless for that kind of application. Then you perform your photometric realistic software, an AGI 32 or visuals, whatever you use, Dialight, whatever you use, and for calculations for the building space. You calculate the CS for the vertical illuminance using the spectral power distribution of the light source that you're picking to specify, or if you don't have a specific light source, try a bunch because you're going to be impressed how different it is, those different light sources. And then you determine whether the lighting system meets your circadian effective lighting design. If not, you have to repeat, change either the luminaire distribution, the spacing of the luminaires, the amount of the luminaires, the light level, and so on to see if you can get to the CS that you want. So let me go into a little bit of detail here. So here is the components of CS. Okay, so these are the things that you need to think about when you're specifying lighting for the circadian system. Okay, so you have the user type. So what are you talking about? Older people, you're talking about adolescents, you're talking about shift workers. What is the population? Office workers, what are you trying to design for? You need to know like history, even though it's very hard to measure. So this is a little bit more of the science part than it is on the application part. You need to know light level at the eye, duration of exposure, the intensity distribution of your light fixture, the spectral power distribution of your light source, and the time of day that you will be delivering the CS of X or Y, okay? So just to give you sort of an idea, during the evening zone, you're targeting a CS of less than 0.1. During your daytime zone, you're targeting something between 0.3 and 0.4. So let me just give a little bit of important considerations that we have to look into it. So for the same CCT, as I mentioned, very different light levels at the eyes are needed to achieve a CS of 0.3. So we're actually writing an article on these data. So we did a lot of calculations with a lot of SPDs, and we have a minimum, a median amount, a maximum, and an outlier. All of these are 3000 K, okay? And you can see that the light levels at the eye that you need to achieve that CS of 0.3 is radically different because of the SPD. So it's a little bit more work for you, but it might be worth doing it because now you can get the most effective SPD to be able to get to that CS. Now, again, SPD is only one component, so this is not the only thing you need to do, and it may not be what matters most, okay? So this is just a different way of looking at it. So if you look at the different CCTs, here you have the vertical illuminance at the eye, and here you have the minimum, medium, maximum, and the outlier for all the different CCTs. So the bottom line here is if you just say 3000 K, your light levels at the eye can vary by 200 to 500 lux at the eye, depending on your SPD, okay? So think about that when you're doing your design. In general, we do know that if you increase the amount of short wavelength in your light source, in other words, if you're using a cooler light source, you tend to need less light to achieve that circadian stimulus. But still, you need to get the SPD to be able to get there. Now, after I said all that, I'm gonna say, but maybe it won't matter because SPD is not as important. If you have a little bit of leverage and you can increase light level, don't bother getting all the SPDs and going through all the calculations. Increase your light levels and you should be good. So here is just saying that we were looking at luminaires to achieve a CS of 0.3. We used 300 lux and 500 lux horizontal. And we used the 3000 K and a 5000 K light sources. At 300 lux, none of the fixtures that we tested met that CS of 0.3 at the eye. At 5000 K, only 2 of the fixtures met that CS of 0.3. Now, if you increase light levels from 300 lux horizontal to 500 lux horizontal, 9 of 12 on the 3000 K meet that design criteria, and 11 of 12 of the 5000 K. So going from 300 to 500 lux horizontal will get you there much easier than going from 3000 K to 5000 K. Okay, so if you have leverage to increase that light level, that's what I would recommend because it will be a much more effective way of doing it. Now, you may be stuck. We did a project and we're doing a research project and the sponsor said they won't take more than 300 lux of the work plane. So we had to work with that. So when you have to work with that, then you can use Spectral to gain some advantage. Now, the other, I think, important contribution is the intensity distribution, okay? You are looking at light level at the eye, but of course you have to design for horizontal foot candles because you have to meet the IS standards, okay? So what you want is a horizontal to vertical ratio to be as large as you can. What we saw is that a ratio of about 0.65 or greater, it's a good ratio, okay? Because it gives you more, basically, bang for your buck, so you can get more of the vertical light with not as much of the horizontal light, okay? So here is just a graph that shows some of the calculations that we did. And again, you have the CS of 0.3, which is your target CS. One of the things that we noted was the downlight, which is all the gray areas that you see there. Very, very few downlights reached that amount of CS. At 300 and a few, only one reached at 500 lux horizontal, okay? All the other ones, and in particular, the direct, indirect, or indirect light sources, those are much better. Why? Because what you get is light that it's distributed throughout your space. So you can have more reflected light into the space, which will increase that vertical illuminance at the eye. Okay, so coming just from the ceiling on a directional light source may not be as effective. Okay, now, think beyond the ceiling, okay? If you look at the supplemental desktop luminaire, where you can have a blue light delivering a little bit, 30 lux of light at the eye, you can hit a CS of 0.4 very quickly. So a lot of times, think about your partition as being a luminous partition. Think about things around your computer screen. Think about your table delivering that light. We did that for Alzheimer's patients where we had a light table, and it was one of the most successful projects we have because they sit around tables all day and they look down. So it was perfect. They were getting that light coming from the table much more effectively. So be creative. The technology exists. Now you can do whatever you want with LEDs. So don't try to get everything out of a ceiling fixture because you may not be able to do it, okay? Now, let me give you an example. So this is just a traditional sort of workstation with 2x4 Troffers. So here are the reflectances, just the typical reflectances with the typical ceiling height and partition height, okay? So the questions that you want to ask is, what is your target circadian stimulus, okay? So here's sort of tips. So if your office layout and your occupant's workspace are known, if your horizontal illuminance has to be more or less than 500 lux on the work plane, so you have to ask yourself, does it have to be less than 500 lux on the work plane? Am I limited to 300 lux on the work plane? Because some sponsors would ask me to do that. Is energy consumption a concern? Okay, do I have problems in meeting those energy codes? And do you prefer warmer CCTs? If all these things are true, or if any of these questions is a yes, you're probably going to have to design to the lower CS because it's going to be easier for you to achieve that lower CS, okay? So what you're looking at is, for example, you select your schedule. So you don't have funding to use a tunable source. So you want to have a static light source. You want to do a 3000K. And this is what this is what you want and what you're going to have as an example for a schedule. So from 7 a.m. to 4 a.m., you have a CS of 0.3. This is how much light you need. This is vertical and this is horizontal illuminance that you need to achieve that CS of 0.3. Now, this is with one SPD of the 3000. It may change. This is just an example that we use, okay? Then you can start dropping it down over the course of the afternoon and the evening. And if somebody's going to work past 8 o'clock, you want to make sure you reduce that to less than 0.1. And then you can add things like a red light, task light, or something that will increase the alertness. And I'll show you some examples for that. If you have the tunable schedule, if you have the funding for it, you can start with a 5000K and then you can drop to a 4000K sort of in the late afternoon, early evening, and then drop to a 3000K after 8 p.m. until the end of the day. So you really need to think about what are the times that you want to deliver that light. If you have problems with energy, you say, all right, I just want to do it for 2 hours in the morning to get that entrainment, and then I need to bring it down. But remember, you also need to keep them alert during the day. So you might want to consider having some task light or something that would increase alertness, okay? Now, if your office layout is unknown and you don't know who's going to be in the space, so you have literally a blank space that you know it's going to be an office, but you don't know what the layout's going to be, you don't know where people are going to sit, you don't know where people are going to look. And if people prefer or accept a cooler CCT, then you should target a CS of 0.4. It's a lot easier because now you have, first of all, you don't know where people are going to be looking at. So now you have to increase the light levels throughout to make sure that however they design that space in terms of furniture, you're going to get that CS value. So here's the same thing. If I use a 5000K on a static schedule, this is what I'm getting. So I'm using, you can see that it's much higher light level. So you're talking now about 800 lux horizontal to be able to get to that CS of 0.4. Okay, so if you have the leverage to do it, by all means, you know, I can tell you a CS outdoors is greater than 0.7. So that's what we want to shoot for. Obviously, we can never have what we have outside inside, but the closer we can get to outside during the day, the better it is. And again, you can do the same thing. If you're going to have a tunable schedule, you can play with now just having the 5000K during the morning hours, and then you drop it in the afternoon, and you drop it even further in the evening by both manipulating your CCT as well as manipulating the light output and the light levels so that you can reduce that CS levels. So how do you implement that in the design? I mean, what's the process? First of all, again, you decide on your design objectives. What is the population you're designing for? And I can tell you if it's older people, I would shoot for higher light levels and higher CS. If it's a younger person, they can get away with a lot less light to be able to see. So you might be able to drop that and come up with more personal devices or personal solutions that will give them that circadian stimulus. And the other question is, do you want to achieve entrainment, just alertness, like it would be, say, for a night shift worker, or do you want to achieve both? So you formulate your 3D model in AGI or whatever, and make sure that you place vertical points at the occupant setting location. So if you now are only putting horizontal points on your AGI or your software, whatever you're using, you have to make sure you add points vertically where you think people in the space are going to be looking at, okay? So here are just examples of how you can do that. So here are, if you look here at the spaces, in that case, I know what the layout's going to be. So you look here, you see these little arrows. Those are all vertical points. Those are where I think people are going to be looking at. And then the squares are the horizontal points that you need to put, okay? And then you run your calculations, you run your AGI, whatever. And using that vertical illuminance that you get with your AGI calculation, okay, with the software, and the SPD that you're planning on using, you then throw that into the calculator. And again, the calculator is freely available. We have no commercial interest in that. We just want people to make it easier for people to use that information, okay? And then you can plug it in, and then you can figure it out if your design actually meets that CS of 0.3. If it doesn't, you have two options. You change the SPD to a little bit cooler, and you'll get a little bit of benefit there, or you're going to have to go back and change your layout, increase the amount of light, or add task light to be able to get to the light levels. Now, as I said before, think of layers of light, okay? So we did actually a simulation of this, and I'd love to see this being implemented. Think about partitions that are actually luminous partitions. And it's interesting, when we first started talking about that, we would think about partitions being low because people want to be able to communicate in the space. I think they're going to go back to being high again because of social distancing and so on. So I think there's an opportunity there for us to start using these partitions as a way to deliver that vertical light, okay? And then again, if you're looking at alertness, especially on shift workers, you want to be able to look at red as a possibility of delivering the alerting stimulus without affecting the biological clock. Now, these fixtures that you see up here, we actually built this here and we tested in buildings with General Service Administration, and we put this under the computer screen. And these were very effective and very well accepted. We actually used that with Air Force as well in their ops room. So those are very practical ways, but again, we just did it for the research, and architects and designers can come up with really nice things. This is the light table that I mentioned for the Alzheimer's. We actually now develop light trays where they can eat and still get the light levels. And these are the light goggles that we developed and tested with nurses in the field to give them some flexibility. So be creative in how you develop that light stimulus, okay? So quickly, in terms of the applications, now this is more sort of visual stuff, so it should go pretty quickly. I have here the website. Again, we just launched it free. You can use, right now we only have the senior care, but we're working on putting the other applications in. So basically, you can choose a room. So say you want the assisted living facility single room, and then you look at, it gives you time of day. So this is the morning, and then the afternoon, the evening, and then the nighttime. And what it does, it gives you, all the CS schedule. It gives you how much lux level at the eye that you need to achieve that CS schedule. And then on the side here, what it gives you is all the assumptions, the lighting solutions, the luminaires, it gives you all the charts. So it gives you all the information about that. So that gives you an idea of what to ask for or what to think about when you're starting a design, okay? We did that for offices, same thing. And I think this is also another very creative solution where you have colored walls, wall washers like that, that actually will increase the amount of CS, because a saturated blue is very, very strong circadian stimulus. If you want to do that in the evening or at night, you can move it to red and you can increase the amount of alertness without affecting the biological clock. Healthcare rooms, same thing. So this is just ideas of things that you can do in the healthcare. And then in terms of school, similar applications, you can think about adding things like these sort of strips or slots of blue and red light. What that does, it helps you not have to increase the light levels as much. So you get that circadian stimulus without increasing the white light sources as much. I want to quickly go through a project we're doing with special ed students here in the Albany area. And this is really a project that we're implementing, and we're going to collect some data looking at the impact of that lighting solution. So you have a lot of problems with these students that have special needs. And, it could be from, sensory overload to ADHD to sleep problems. So what we're doing is we're working with 3 rooms over there. And we're trying to improve the student's sleep, so deliver a circadian stimulus, as well as in one of the rooms, try to improve their behavior and agitation levels. So I hate to say it, but we're really using all the knowledge that we acquired with Alzheimer's patients in terms of agitation and sleep, and we're actually transferring that to those students that have special needs, especially the ones that have behavioral needs. And we'll obviously give controls to the teachers and incorporate some of the daylight solutions and educate teachers, parents, and even the students about the impacts that light can have, especially evening light. Because you can do beautiful lighting in schools, but if you don't let people know what they need to do in the evening, you can wipe out all the benefits and all the positive effects, okay? So here are the 3 classrooms that they have. What they call the connections one is where they stay most of their time. So we're trying to give that entrainment in the connections room. The strides room is the one that they go when they need to calm down or when they need to do something more special and so on. So we're trying to get a lighting that will get them focused or calming, so more of strategic effects with it. And then they have the sensory room, which is really playing and trying to calm them down. So this is just some of the design that we did. So we're going to be trying out that strip of blue LED in the lighting so that we don't need to increase the amount of light as much. And we are getting the CS levels that we were looking for just with 10 lux of the blue. This is the Strides classroom. We're trying things like, the Acadia from Cree that maybe they will be working with us, because we're also looking at people that are willing to donate or make it a better price. So they offer to do that. So we're going to be working with that as well. And then I just want to put that out. I don't know if you've seen that. This is a YouTube video that Allison, who's actually the one working on the school, did. It's really cool. So this is, when I say blue light, the blue slot or the blue light under your computer screen, this is what I'm talking about. It's really a saturated blue color. Or you can do white light sources where you can range the CCT. So what she did is she is actually in that video teaching people how to build these fixtures so they can put it around their computer screens. Okay, so you can actually do that with paper. It's a paper luminaire basically. And it's really effective because it does increase the amount of CS. So if all you need is to put this around your computer screen, try it, because I think it would be very interesting. And then you can use that in the evening with a red light so that it doesn't affect your sleep, or you can use the warm color light at night, the dim warm color light at night. So just as final thoughts, bright days and dim nights, you want to be able to try to return to more natural 24-hour light dark cycle. We have now shown a series of field studies, and obviously I didn't have time to show here, that if you deliver that CS of 0.3 during the day and less than 0.1 in the evening, you significantly improve sleep behavior and mood in various populations. I think you need to be skeptical. You need to ask questions. Just don't take the first fixture that somebody offers you telling you this is the best in the world. You know, you have to really do your homework, do your research, read about it, and try to get the best you can. The options are out there. It's up to you to pick the best ones. And I think for now we have the UL design guide, and I know we're going to have the IES document pretty soon because I'm working on the committee and it's moving along. So I think we're starting to have more ways of getting more information about that. So with that, I want to thank you, and here are the links so you can do whatever you want and use whatever you want to hopefully help you. So I'll stop sharing and
Great. I will say that you hit the 50-minute mark just like you said you would. I thank you very much, Dr. Figueroa. I think it's great to see this science turned into real solutions. For a while, I was thinking I should have taken a class before I participated, but thank you for making it touch home. Before we get into larger question and answer from the group, I just wanted to let everybody know that in the chat box right now, if you can open it, you'll see a link. That is to a Google form. If you haven't already, please fill out your name, your AIA number so that you can get credit. And I think it must have a checkbox if you need a certificate. But I think, Tina, I can turn it to you as well. I think the best way probably to take question and answer, we can try to do it. I'm not sure if we have enabled raised hands, but the chat box is probably going to be the best.
I have to put my glasses on to read. All right, I'm getting AIA numbers. I can't answer that, I'm sorry.
Okay, and I'm also seeing from one participant, they're not seeing anything in the chat room.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the link either, Bob. Sorry.
Interesting. Okay. We had the BSA representatives pasted in ahead of time. Let me see if I can repaste it.
So it looks like we have a question from, I'm not going to say your name correctly, but Nurhan. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask the question?
Yes, hi.
Hi.
First of all, this lecture or this webinar has been really helpful. And I've been, just to like very quickly introduce myself, my name is Nurhan Said, and I'm a master's student at Georgia Tech. My master focus is mostly on circadian entrainment for MCI individuals. And so I had a question with the CS calculator. So when I use this, I used it before. I was mostly focusing on the Wells standard and also on just focusing on higher values of higher lux values. But I was interested as well in the macular pigment density that is already there.
Yep.
I needed more, like, I wanted to understand it a bit more because with the age difference, it's kind of hard.
Yeah.
To, like,
It's interesting because the macular pigment density, it's not as much have to do with age. It does change. It's very individually different. So we've been measuring a lot of that here. We've done a lot of measurements, and it goes from 0.2 to 0.7. So we tell people if you use something around 0.4, 0.5, you're pretty much in a good range. Now with the aging eye, what happens is not necessarily the macular, but it's you have obviously the lenses and you have thicker eyes and so on. So that's why for the aging, my recommendation is go up to 0.4. If you go up to a CS of 0.4, you take that sort of into account. All these differences that you're going to have with the aging eye can be taken into account if you increase the CS to 0.4.
okay, and also another question, is all of the recommendations, especially for designing the space, is it also related to daylighting? So for like, because we're assuming what if this place is like in a very daylit space, like
Absolutely.
it gets a lot of sun.
Absolutely. Daylight is a perfect light source. If you can get people outside, and in fact, we just finished a survey we did during the COVID, lockdown of people working at home. Amazing. We're going to be submitting some preliminary results next week. You'll see it. Incredible. If you spend 1 hour or more outdoors, you sleep better, you are less stressed, you have less depression. If you stay in a room that you consider bright, somewhat bright, you again sleep better, less depression, less stress than if you stay in a dim room. So daylight is a perfect light source. If you can increase daylight in the space, go for it. What I've noticed in nursing homes and assisted living facilities, very little daylight. People tend to be in very dingy, dark rooms. So absolutely, courtyard, going outside, whatever you can, best light source.
But that won't affect like the CS value that is going to be recommended for the space, or would it?
Correct. And the calculator, you can actually add light sources. And there is one that it's, a D65, which is what you would use to represent daylight.
Okay, thank you.
And if you want to email me with more questions, feel free to do it. That's fine. I'm happy to help.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I know one of the other questions being asked was whether the PowerPoint would be available. I know at the very least, the video recording of this presentation will be available.
Yeah, no, I can share the PowerPoint, and I can tell you a lot of the information is on the website too, because a lot of the patterns and everything it's on the website. So yes, I definitely can share. It's not a problem. There is an interesting question here. I think it might be good to answer. Said it seems like the workforce will have different office hours, and the 8 to 5 or 8 to 8 p.m. won't be the general rule. How would you approach to the CS value and the design approach between day and night? Should you design it differently? This is actually a good question because it is true. A lot of people are going to be working in shifts. And I think it really depends on what you want to accomplish, okay? So if you know every day you're gonna be working from noon to 8 and you wanna delay yourself, you can have a lighting scheme that you promote that delay. And what you wanna do is really your lighting, your CS, it's higher in the first part of your day, whatever that day is, and it gets lower 2 to 3 to 4 hours prior to your sleep time. So you can actually design based on each individual's schedule, if they're gonna do that every day. Now, with shift workers, they're only really 2 or 3 days, then they go back to days. So shift workers is very hard. So what you wanna do with shift workers, unfortunately, you keep them as daytime person, and you just give them something, a cup of coffee or a red light to increase that alertness during the nighttime hours when they have to work. So again, remember my first question that I had, I told you guys have to ask, who am I designing this for? What's the population? What's their schedule? And then you can work around that. If you don't know that, then there's not much you can do. You're gonna have to have a, 6 to 6 or 7 to 7 clock time, and then assume that that's what people are gonna be doing. There's not much else you can do, okay? Somebody's asking about green light for migraine and pain treatment. How does this affect CS? Well, it depends on the light level. You can do the calculation. So you can put the SPD there and the light level at the eye, and you can see how much CS it gives you. If you crank up enough light level, you will have CS. So you need more light with the green than you need with the blue, but you can still have meltdown suppression, CS levels with green, depending on the amount. The other question, how about seasonal variation? Is it beneficial to have the artificial daylight combination adjusted to the yearly variation of natural light, or try to create an ideal day? In other words, how does this relate to variations in different latitudes? I think it really depends. So there has been a study that Ronenberg did in Europe, which was very interesting. He compared the use of the high CCT, everybody calls it blue enriched. I hate this term, but that's what everybody uses. He compared the use of that kind of light in an office and then just regular lights. And what he showed was really interesting is that people will entrain to that high CCT light source in the built environment. And if you don't have that, people will actually entrain to the seasons. So they'll end up, waking up earlier and earlier in the summer compared to the winter, because they're more, for example, now that it's, you have light very early, people tend to wake up early. And then when the winter months, they tend to sleep in more. I think it really depends, again, on your population. Honestly, and it is a preference, because I don't think anybody has done an epidemiological studies looking at benefits or non-benefits of that. Personally, I hate the darkness in the winter, and I much rather have 12 hours of light if I can than have only 6 or 7 hours of light in the winter. So I'd rather have the electric light supplementing that, and that's how seasonal depression is actually cured or treated. It's by giving them the light, because you're increasing the photoperiod of a person that suffers from seasonal depression. So I think that there is an advantage of increasing your amount of light during the day and not necessarily follow what the sun does, because in places like Iceland, or we've done work in Iceland and in Riga, Latvia, during the winter months, it's very hard for people. In Iceland, the sun doesn't come up till 11:30 in the morning. Honestly, I think the electric lighting should supplement that. That would be my recommendation, but I think that's more of a personal, because there's not enough data to say which one is better. There's a question of how is the IES committee responding to your research suggesting 800 horizontal foot candles? You mean the Energy Committee? I don't know. I mean, and I'm telling you, I'm not suggesting 80 horizontal foot candles. You can actually work on that if you get better distribution, if you get, you know, light sources like something around your computer screen or task sources. You know, you don't necessarily have to have the 80 horizontal foot candles. The 80 horizontal foot candles, if really you don't want to think about it, then that's what you do. But I think that everybody would do their due diligence to think about it and bring it back to more reasonable light levels, okay? Now, unfortunately, we do need more light for the circadian system. That's a fact. And I think the spaces should be brighter. And, you know, we just did a video about how do you think the future of lighting is going to be. I really think the spaces are going to be brighter because, honestly, dingy, dark spaces to me look dirty and it reminds me of illness. And I think nobody wants that anymore. So I think brighter, open spaces, I think it's going to give you that message that it's healthier. I don't know, but I am willing to fight the DOE and the IES and whoever complains about energy, because I think energy is not everything. I'm not in favor of wasting energy, but I think that there's a lot of benefit of increasing light levels in the space that we need to take into account and change some of the energy codes that have only been based on visibility and power. Yes, somebody's asking, is full spectrum light just a marketing term? Yes, yes, yes. And it's the same thing as blue enriched. Yes, yes, yes. Don't fall for any of these marketing things. Do your due diligence, get your SPD, do your calculations, and you will know what you're talking about. Now, there are some new light sources now, like I know that, is it, Seoul, and I think is it Toshiba, whatever, they're trying to do more of a white light, which is more of a fuller spectrum. Some of them are actually fuller spectrum in the sense that what full spectrum is it emits energy at all wavelengths of the spectrum. That's what a full spectrum is, okay? So you can look at the SPD and you would know if it's a full spectrum or not. Full spectrum with fluorescent lights, not full spectrum because it has 3 peaks. So that's by definition is not full spectrum. Okay, so yes, so just be careful with those marketing names that people try, circadian lighting and, you know, blue enriched and all that. There's no such thing, okay. How are you dealing with SPDs from tunable sources? That's a little bit more complicated, but what you need to ask the manufacturers at least to give you the SPDs at different CCTs that they're using. And then with that, you can at least calculate what you're getting. It's not going to be exact, but at least it gives you an idea. Okay, I think I answered most of the questions that were in the chat, I think. Yep. So, and we're only 5 minutes over.
Okay, great.
So who should I share the presentation with so you guys can make it available?
I would suggest maybe, I think you and Tina had been in contact.
I was in contact with Alexandra.
I think
Okay.
Alexandra can share it with me.
Okay.
Great, and we'll get that posted. This has been an incredible turnout. Very happy to see everybody engaged. We're hoping to get more topics out there in the coming month and get a healthy dialogue going. Thank you again so much, Mariana. This has been wonderful.
And go out, get an hour of daylight. We have new data, pretty nice. And look out for that. It's coming next week, the press release with the data. So just go outdoors. I can't stress the benefit of having regular circadian rhythms. It is healthy, especially in this time of pandemic. So do not underestimate the power of light. There's a lot of power. So. All
That's-
right.
Well,
Thanks,
for joining us.
everyone, for attending. Thank you.
Mariana. We appreciate
Thank
it.
you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.